A country run by a crime family, total subjugation of the people, things that are unspeakable in their horror, but they're taking place in a country called North Korea. So we'll be talking about that today. Terry?
That's exactly right. A UN panel has blasted North Korea for its brutal practices, including torture, mass starvations, and much worse. George Thomas spoke with one of the panel's chief witnesses against North Korea, and here's his report.
For 28 years, Kim Ye-suk was a prisoner inside North Korea's oldest concentration camp. In late 2011, soon after her miraculous escape from the communist country, Kim gave CBN News the first Western television news interview. How many members of your family were killed in the labor camp?
7. I lost 7 members, including my grandmother, mother, brother, and my husband.
More than 80 witnesses were interviewed for the UN's year-long investigation. One of their leading witnesses was Kim Ye-suk. You saw public executions. You saw people get killed inside the camp.
Yes, I witnessed countless public executions. And often these prisoners were killed over petty things like stealing food. The guards would always gather other prisoners to watch the execution. It was a form of intimidation.
Rape, murder, torture, slavery, sexual violence, forced abortions, just a few of the words found in the 374-page report that the UN says amount to crimes against humanity.
The Commission of Inquiry has unanimously come to the conclusion that there is abundant evidence of great wrongs of this kind.
Kim told investigators that food was in short supply, that fellow prisoners killed their own children to stave off hunger.
One time, a mother put her 9-year-old daughter in this big cast iron pot and boiled her. She was too big for the pot, so the mother had to chop her legs and head to feed the body in the pot.
The report estimates that between 80,000 and 120,000 political prisoners are still held in prison camps. Jung Yong-kang was one of them. He told CBN News that before being released, he was severely tortured for alleged spying activities. While he was in the Yodok labor camp, Mr. Kang says the prison guards performed a particularly harsh procedure on him. It's called the pigeon torture. In essence, the prisoner is held from the wall with his hands tied behind his back, and he's put in this position for days on end.
This happened repeatedly. It's like you're hanging upside down. Your muscles tense up and your chest sticks out like a bird. I thought I was going to die.
An estimated 30,000 Christians are also reportedly being held in prison for their faith, owning a Bible, praying, worshiping. These are all acts that can put up to 3 generations of a family in jail. The UN is expected to submit their findings to the International Criminal Court with potential charges against the regime's leadership. North Korea has dismissed the report, saying, quote, "It is nothing more than an instrument of political plot aimed at sabotaging the socialist system." George Thomas, CBN News.
Can you imagine Dennis Rodman, earrings and lip rings and all, going over there and hugging that monster, saying he's my buddy? Ladies and gentlemen, this is horrible. There's a book that was given to me several years ago called The Aquariums of Pyongyang that go into great detail about what's happening in that awful, hellish environment. And those people suffer beyond the limit of human endurance. And it's time that the criminal court to issue an indictment against that family. And at the same time, the Russians and the Chinese probably will oppose it. But let's hope in this case they won't, because they must be embarrassed too by what these people are doing. Now, why did we have this? Just keep in mind the policy decisions of the United States have enormous consequences, and they last for decades. We had the opportunity, and I was in the Marine Corps in Korea, I know where I speak. We had the opportunity in that peninsula to close it off and win a military victory. General MacArthur was going on the way to the Yalu River. He was going to set up a defense line across that boundary, and then he was going to mop up what was there, and we would have installed a democratic government in Korea. Instead of that, the politicians were scared of, quote, what the Russians might think or what the Chinese might think. And they took MacArthur home in seeming disgrace. He was cashiered by Truman. And we made a line on the 38th parallel, and we allowed Kim's grandfather to be, he was a colonel, I believe, in the army there that was put in place by the Russians. And we allowed him to set up a dictatorship and have had that country on the watch list. Now they have developed nuclear weapons. Who knows whether they have chemical weapons? And they have tormented their people. And at the same time, we send delegations over there to make peace with them. There's no peace with a group like that. They should be arrested and executed. And but it's not just the Kim family; it's the whole army that's there. But something must be done. It's a disgrace to the whole human race to have something like that there. It is just an absolute blot on all of our consciences. And so there you have it, and there are ways to deal with it, but so far we haven't dealt with it successfully. Well, there's a church in South Korea which is mourning today after a terrorist attack in Egypt killed some of its members. John Jessup has more on that story from Washington.
That's right, Pat. At least 2 South Korean Christians are dead after the tourist bus they were traveling in exploded in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. The bombing is believed to be the work of al-Qaeda-linked insurgents. Ephraim Graham has the story.
The attack happened near the Egypt-Israel border crossing.
There was an explosion, and then came the fire truck and the ambulance, but they couldn't do anything.
And the target, a bus filled with 31 South Korean Christians visiting biblical sites in the region.
The South Korean government cannot but feel anger and outrage and strongly condemn the terrorist bombing attack.
The bus was carrying members of the Jincheonjugang Presbyterian Church out of Seoul, many of whom had reportedly saved up money for several years to go on the trip. Late this evening, church members, some of them sobbing, gathered in front of the church. One family member of a bus victim can be heard saying, "She's dead, she's dead. My sister is dead." Egyptian authorities say the bomber reportedly boarded the bus as it was preparing to cross into Israel. An Egyptian driver was also killed. Several on board were taken to nearby hospitals, suffering serious injuries. It was the first such attack targeting foreign tourists in Sinai Peninsula. South Korea's government held an emergency meeting, vowing to help the Egyptian government find out who carried out the attack.
The Egyptian foreign minister has acknowledged the seriousness of this incident and has expressed his intent to pour all efforts into handling the situation.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
A former nurse at a Planned Parenthood facility in Indianapolis is speaking out, calling it evil. Marian Anderson worked at Indiana's largest provider of abortions. Speaking to the Criterion newspaper of the Catholic Archdiocese of Indianapolis, she says she was on the fence about abortion when she first started working there, but became uneasy when people from the National Planned Parenthood office visited. She says they had a chant saying abortion all the time. Anderson describes it as a money-grubbing, evil, very sad place to work. And she recounts some of the difficult experiences she had there, including dealing with women who had terrible reactions to their abortions. You can find a link to the interview on cbnnews.com. Pat?
The American Center for Law and Justice, of which I am the head, is suing Planned Parenthood in California. They had a case in Texas which was settled. There's one in California that is a real big one. The Planned Parenthood has hired the law firm of the former Attorney General Jimmy Carter to handle their legal work. And they have thrown up a series of smoke screens and barricades against discovery and all the rest of it. It's just been a nightmare. But in each case, the American Center has prevailed, had a favorable ruling in the Ninth Circuit, and it's going ultimately to trial. Now, we have discovered that Planned Parenthood is enormously rich. And some of these individual chapters may have as much as $1 billion in cash on hand. They are getting, right now, from the federal government, it's in the budget, $550 million a year, taxpayer money to go into that abortion mill. And when you read the writings of Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of this organization, it is the most shocking thing that you can simply imagine. She was slightly crazy. But the wealthy people decided that rather than having a flood of poor people, especially of other races, born in our cities, that the best thing to do was mass abortion. And that's what's been going on with Planned Parenthood using United States government money. And now we're beginning to we'll lift the veil. When this trial comes up, it's going to be huge, and the amount of money is enormous. We're talking about huge amounts of money. It is an abortion mill, and anything beyond that, all these fancy phrases with Faye Waddleton and people like that who are in charge of it, it's just nonsense. I mean, it is a massive, massive money-making abortion mill, and I'm glad this lady's speaking up, but you're going to hear more about it in the future, trust me. John?
Pat, Monday marked the 5-year anniversary of President Obama's economic stimulus package, and the White House and Republicans are still arguing over how much it really helped the economy. The measure cost around $800 billion. The White House claims it helped create or saved more than 1.5 million jobs. But Republicans say the stimulus was just another example of big government spending with little results. And they say even 5 years later, Americans are still dropping out of the workforce. International talks over Iran's nuclear program are underway again in Vienna, but many leaders, including Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu, doubt they'll be successful. Chris Mitchell explains why in this report from Jerusalem.
The talks will bring Iran together with the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany. Their goal is to finalize a deal reached last November in Geneva. Under that 6-month accord, Iran agreed to cap its nuclear program in return to limited sanctions relief by the West. Here in Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told a meeting of American Jewish leaders the interim deal has slowed Iran's nuclear program by only 4 weeks.
That's what Iran has given to the world, which means it's given practically nothing. But Iran has received a great deal. It's received the easing of sanctions. It's given 4 weeks. But it's receiving a new position in the world. It's being legitimized.
Netanyahu warned Iran's new centrifuges are 50 times faster than their old ones, and that Iran is developing ICBMs with one goal in mind.
By the way, the range is geared to Europe and soon to the United States. It's not for us. And there's only one purpose in the world to develop ICBMs. You develop an ICBMs in order to deliver a nuclear payload.
This is not a country that our government can trust.
Former Governor Mike Huckabee told CBN News current U.S. policy toward Iran is naive.
I'm amazed of the naivete of the Obama administration when it comes to Iran. The Iranians are laughing up their sleeves, they're dancing in the streets because they're getting everything they want. Once again, this country that is not being held accountable, not only for their actions in trying to accelerate toward nuclear weaponization, but they're virtually being rewarded for the hateful, not just anti-Semitic, but anti-human rhetoric that they have tossed to not just Israel, but to the United States.
The talks in Vienna are expected to last for 3 days. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Pat, there are many questions if these talks will really gather much momentum.
Well, who cares whether they do or not? The Iranians are liars. They're not telling the truth. They're laughing. It's just a stall so they could build these things. But I want people to recognize, ladies and gentlemen, there's an intercontinental ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. That's what those things mean. And it means it'll go from one continent to another. What continent? Out there in the Middle East over to our continent. And it will carry a payload. Even if it's a small bomb, it'll be enough to destroy one of our cities. And imagine we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, the head of Mullah over in Iran says, we don't like your policy in relation to trade sanctions or whatever, and if you don't lift them, we're going to pulverize Washington or New York or Philadelphia or Baltimore. That's what they're looking at. And then suddenly, an American president is going to be faced with putting one of his cities on the table in front of a group of crazies. Now, keep this else in mind. We've just discovered a plot by Iranians to hack into one of our major naval facilities in relation to computer activity, and it's much more extensive than was initially thought. They are actively trying to subvert us. And Israel is the big little Satan, we're the big Satan. They want Israel off the map. They want to obliterate Israel, and then they want to take us out of the game. And can you imagine Washington being pulverized? Can you imagine Philadelphia, Boston, Baltimore, New York? That's what they're talking about. It's very serious. And all this business about talks, this is nonsense. John?
Pat, an asteroid nearly the size of 3 football fields flew by Earth overnight. The asteroid was tracked on a website, but not much was visible. The space rock never came closer to Earth than 2 million miles. It was 885 feet in diameter and moving 27,000 miles an hour. The flyby came just a year after an asteroid exploded near the Russian city of Chelyabinsk. That asteroid was only 65 feet in diameter. Experts have warned for years that the Earth lives in a, quote, cosmic shooting gallery, and if a large one hits, it could do huge damage. Pat, that asteroid was simply massive.
Well, I wrote a book. It's called The End of the Age. I recommend, if you can get copies of it, I don't know if it's still in print, I think it is, but I laid it out in no uncertain terms what would happen. It'd just take 1 kilometer, which is 0.6 of a mile in diameter, weighing 3 billion pounds, and it would essentially devastate the United States or devastate the civilized world. And we're talking about, they've got those that are called impactors and extinctors, and if they hit one of those, if it's a mile or more in diameter and comes in at the speed that they catch fire, and then it's just hellish. And when you read the words of Jesus Christ in the Bible, it is frightening. And he says, except those days were shortened, there will be no flesh remaining on earth. There'll be nobody alive on the earth. And the only thing that would make the moon turn to blood and the sun is obscured and all the rest of it that is talked about in the Bible is an asteroid hit. That's the thing that'll do it. And there are billions of those things floating around in space. You know, as the congressman said, it's a cosmic shooting gallery, and we're up there. And fortunately, God in his wisdom placed a great big planet named Jupiter near to us, and that can attract some of these big things and pull them away from Earth and over to Jupiter. But what if something comes through, and they are coming through? It wouldn't take much. And ladies and gentlemen, it's tough. So time to do a lot of praying. We've got some difficult things coming up in the future, and I think we need God's help like never before.
Iowa State University is removing Bibles from campus hotel guest rooms. The Des Moines Register reports a guest complained to the Freedom from Religion Foundation. The atheist group asked the university to take the Bibles out of the rooms, arguing that providing Bibles to guests facilitates illegal endorsement of Christianity over other religions and over non-religion. The Bibles will now be placed in the university's library for lending. The Church of England will not give its blessings to people in same-sex marriages, even after they become legal in the United Kingdom next month. Church bishops say clergy can offer an informal prayer if a couple asks for it. The bishops also say people in a gay marriage should not be ordained, and that people who are already ordained should not marry someone of the same sex. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.